listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what's happening out there? Hope you're well, and thanks a million for checking out my show Straight to Video. So, I've been on a big Poison kick these past few months. I'm back doing the Poison tribute band, that's Poison with a Z, which myself and Rob Wild originally formed over 10 years ago. And we also recently kickstarted a Poison fan page on Facebook. Sure, all shameless promotion of something I'm involved in, but it's really brought back the love I have for this amazing hard rock band. Officially, the band that made me want to be in a band right back in 1990. So the Facebook page has been nothing short of amazing, simply as it's unearthed some really old photos and stories, and fans have found themselves actually in these photos which they've never seen before. It's been pretty awesome. If you're a fan of the band, then just search out Poison UK Fans on Facebook and check it out. But why am I telling you all this? Well, today's guest is guitarist, songwriter and producer Blues Saraceno, who for a short time in the mid-90s replaced guitarist Richie Kotzen in Poison, did some of the band's biggest ever shows, and also recorded the much underappreciated album Crack a Smile, which was originally shelved by the label but finally got a release in the early 2000s. Many of us were already very familiar with Blues when he got the gig. You simply couldn't escape him in the pages of guitar magazines at the time, so he was without a doubt a real name when Poison announced him. Blues, though, already had an impressive resume, several instrumental guitar albums, and also touring the world with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, and really created a cool identity for himself. But since Poison, what has Blues been doing? Well, whilst not being in the spotlight, his career has gone from strength to strength. He became a much in-demand producer, but perhaps where he really found success was writing and recording music for film and television. So whilst his face and his plaid guitars went in your eyes, his music has more than likely appeared in one of your favourite TV shows or films. Now, Blues has some really insightful thoughts on all of this and fame and success in general, which I think are worth taking on board, so I hope you enjoy listening. We chat all about this and what he's been up to, and catching Blues first thing in the morning meant he was fully jacked and ready to talk, so please strap in tight. As always, this Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. Affinity Photo is used to create the podcast episode art what you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market. So please, if you can, check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, let's dive into this chat with Blues Saraceno. For all the info on his amazing career, head on over to bluessaraceno.com and maybe check out extrememusic.com, who Blues works alongside, as the material on show there is insane, and it's a real snapshot into a part of the music industry many perhaps don't realise. Right now though, please enjoy my straight to video chat with Blues Saraceno. How's it going, sir?
How are you doing?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? What the joys of technology.
What are we? We must be 4,500 miles away or something like that.
Right? This is version 2.0. And here's the crazy part. I was literally working all night. So now this is like me getting up. So you're getting me first thing in the morning. Who knows what'll happen, you know?
No, I appreciate you taking the time to do it. I know you're a super, super busy guy. So
no problem.
Appreciate you talking to me.
Trust me, I'm happy to be that busy. It's a lot, especially as you get older, you know, because you're like, just different things become important. But, you know, California is nuts and it's crazy expensive. And so, you know, trying to raise a family here is like a shark. You just got to keep swimming at all times, you know, because it just never ever ends.
Is that frustrating with it being so expensive? It's like living in London. It's like the prices are crazy, man.
Brutal. So it's a 2-point issue. One is, okay, there's the expense. Oh, it's funny. And speaking of London, I'm going to be there on the 20th. We're tracking at Abbey Road. So we're going to go in to do some work. I'll be with the Extreme Camp and we're going to be doing some stuff. But I love going to London because it's always work related. So you go in at a certain level and it's really exciting. We stay at real nice places and we just, you know, you get to cherry pick the scenario. So it's great. But back to California, it's a 2-part scenario. So there's the expense. So think of it like this. It's one thing if you're going to pay, if something's really expensive, but if you get what you're paying for, and you're happy with it, then I guess that's okay. It's like my kids. Sometimes it's like, oh, we want to go to the orthodontist. So I pay a premium and I go to like the super orthodontist. And, it's obviously more than the orthodontist next door, But if you get the result, you're like, I paid more, but it's worth it to me. That's okay. The problem with California is, think of it like this. You know how you always pay a premium for like waterfront property, let's say, because it's, it's rare and there's only so much of it. So you pay a premium, you buy your waterfront property, and then you walk out one day and there's no water.
Yeah.
That's what California's become. The policies are ruining this place. There's so much talent here and there's so many natural resources. The weather is incredible. You can be skiing and surfing within the same day. It's crazy. You know what I mean? You can be walking along the beach. You can be up in the sequoias. I mean, it's just beautiful place with amazing resources, and the policies are disgusting. So it's rough, and so it's hard when you're paying a premium. I mean, I'm probably getting taxed to do this interview. It's crazy.
Oh, man. First question, what's the cap?
Okay, so I work with a good friend of mine, this guy named Rob Smith. He's considered my favorite Australian, and he has a couple different projects. One of those ones is called Horrorhead. They're out of Australia. It's hardcore, and then it's got punk elements to it. So I like things that are like, I like to get it before the world kind of gets to it a little bit. I was all hot on Amyl and the Sniffers, and then, they started blowing up, and I'm like, damn it, now I got to find another band. I tend to like really fringe stuff. I'll be driving in the car, and I'll be listening to Swedish death metal, and then 2 minutes later, I'm listening to like Arlo Guthrie, and then bluegrass picking. I like all the fringe stuff. It's like expanding your vocabulary a little bit. I like anything that's good, to be honest with you. Anything that's done really, really well, even if it's not my favorite genre, I always just like, I just appreciate excellence in any form, whether it's art, whether it's film, whether it's construction, whether it's literature. I like the exceptional stuff. And of course, exceptional, that's by whose definition?
Yeah. Absolutely. Obviously, I'm coming to you from the UK, so it's great to connect. Is it just London you've been to? I'm coming to you from Nottingham, so I'm like right in the middle.
So I've been kind of all through London. Back when I was in my teens, I toured with Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, and he lived about 2 hours out, and I forget which. It was like a little farm estate out in, and for him, and I said, hey, Jack, why do you live so far out here? He was obviously had done quite well. He's like, I get in less trouble out here. He liked the solitude, and he was, he was a family man at heart. So I think just having his little kind of oasis in the countryside is beautiful, especially when you hit like a nice sunny day. It's just like nothing else, and so it's crazy. Like there'd be nothing, we'd have to go to the pub to get like food. It was crazy. So I've always kind of had a huge affinity for England, especially the school systems. I just felt they were very, very advanced compared to what we had over here. US has got some beautiful, great things. There's certain things about it that are just untouchable. Absolutely. But there are a lot of holes in the plan.
I think people will say the same thing about the UK now if you sat down and spoke.
I'm sure. Anybody that's realistic, I think that's the advantage of touring and traveling is you get perspective. So you start realizing, hey, we have some things really locked and we have some things that are just embarrassing. Literally embarrassing. Think about this. When you go to a different country, everybody knows multiple languages fluently. We can't even speak English well over here in the United States. It's rough. So the school systems were not good. At least my experiences. I grew up obviously on the low end of income, especially when I was younger, real low end. And the public school systems were horrible. They just were, we would just try and go to school and try not to get stabbed. That was kind of like the plan. And it's also over here, it's interesting. You have teachers and they get tenured in. So a lot of them aren't really worthy of the position sometimes, but because of the situation, they're there. So you have to kind of navigate that. Much like anything in life. So the advantage of traveling, like, going to Japan, you realize now that's an efficient country. You see when the train says 8:02, at 8:01, you hear it rumbling, and at 8:02, it pulls up to the yellow line.
And people are pissed if it's in at 8:03. Like, where is it?
Oh, 8:03, that's it. Yeah, that's right. And just culture. The doors open, people gently, politely, no pushing. They gently escort, if there's someone that's older than you give them your seat, like standard stuff. So with my kids, we're now hitting the age, we're trying to do some more traveling. I'm going to take them to Japan this year just to see that. I just want them to have perspective, to realize everything isn't Instagram and the Kardashians over here. It's rough, So I've always kind of had a love affair with the UK, to be honest with you, because whenever I went there, it was always under great circumstances. So I kind of show up and I get to see the best of the best, and it's great. And the food's, we get to these, people know the places, and we've been very fortunate to deal with just really nice people. And like, I'll give you an example. When I went to the UK, I want to say maybe 5 years ago, I brought one of my custom guitars. It's an Ernie Ball Gold Sparkle Albert Lee guitar that they made for me 25 years ago, maybe. And I always take it with me everywhere because it's a great live guitar. It looks great. People really seem excited about it. It's got a cool sound and it's got a very nice playing neck. So it's a fun one to travel. So I took it. And the gentleman that was kind of part of the car service, he's like, really playing. He's like, hey, let me take your guitar for you. And he's, I was like, oh yeah, cool. It's really nice of you. He takes the guitar. And in the confusion, everybody was loading into the car and, it was like a car service, really nice high-end car service. And in the confusion, we're putting the bags in. I get in. We were traveling with a larger group of people. And in the confusion, just by the accident, the guitar was left on the side because it was just the way everybody had luggage. And, so we get in the car, we take off, we get about 10 minutes and the driver, he's like, oh, and he turns the car around, we go back, and the guitar's not there anymore. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh man, that one, that is what it was. But I told the guy, I said, hey, listen, let's make every effort we can to find it. If we can get it, cool. If not, don't lose sleep over it. It's just a thing. It's not worth, but he was really had so much integrity as a person that he was just truly upset by it. It was something that he just as a genuine person that cared about his quality of doing his job was really bummed out about it. And so we go to the airport. We spent like maybe an hour and a half there and we couldn't track it down. Anyways, he's like, well, I want to file a police report. I'm like, you're welcome to if you want. I said, but it's probably in the wind and, life happens, So I really was just like, fine. I was just worried about, I'll grab another guitar and we'll do the show and it is what it is. So long story short, this other gentleman that was also like another person that took people around, he saw the guitar and he's like, okay, but his client had come along. So he's like, he's trying to do the right thing, but he's got his client and he can't stop the job for his client. So he doesn't know what to do. He's asking around. In Heathrow, you have to walk like over this. You had to walk literally like over a half a mile to get it to this place. This guy's got a client. He's like, all right, I'll just grab it. I'll toss it in the boot of the car and then I'll just bring it to the police station. So all this is getting done. So I'm at the hotel and of course I get contacted. This gentleman reaches out via the internet to the guys at Ernie Ball and they're like, hey, who owns this guitar? And they're like calling me I literally 6 hours later, I'm getting a call at my hotel. I'm like, hey, there's someone that's got your thing. Now, meanwhile, a police report's been filed. So no one knows. Everybody thought the guitar was taken when it wasn't. The long and short of it was the guy did the right thing, tried to track us down. And the cops got on a train for an hour and a half to go pick the guitar up and brought it to me in my hotel. That's unheard of. That's never done. In the U.S., that would be at the nearest pawn shop. You know what I mean? It would be on eBay within 35 minutes.
Yeah. Did you put him on the guest list?
Absolutely. And I didn't know what to do. I wanted to give the guy a reward, but then everybody I was with was like, yeah, if you do that, it makes it cheap. You know what I mean? So brought him and his wife to the show and gave him a bottle of the good stuff. I just didn't know what to do. I wanted to be like, hey man, I'm sure the money would have been huge. But I didn't want to insult him because he was just obviously a person of integrity. And they all were. The cops were so nice and so polite.
Was it like National Lampoon's European Vacation where they keep running over? Is it Eric Idle? And he's like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. Just super polite all the time.
Yeah, just crazy. So my point is you just learn to appreciate other things and it kind of gives you hope because to be honest with you, especially raising kids, my view of the world is it's getting dimmer and dimmer because of course the news being over here, it's horrible. Nobody trusts the news in any way, shape or form over here. If they tell you it's sunny, put on a rain jacket, you know what I mean? It's so bad and it's catching up because everybody's over it and anybody that kind of thinks of themselves is done. But my point is it's nice to know that there are people out there that are just of caliber and it gives me hope because that's who I aspire to be on a certain level, regardless of music or just as a person.
Wonderful, mate. But Abbey Road, have you been to Abbey Road before?
Never been.
Wow, man. How cool is that going to be?
We have a bunch of different projects. I've been working with this company, Extreme Music, which they're out of the UK. And even though I'm always my own entity, because I wanted to be able to kind of, especially as I got more and more successful in the industry, I wanted to be able to work with the people that were exciting to work with. That was a challenge. Obviously, in the beginning, you just want to make a living and you want to survive. And then everything changes. The girlfriend becomes a wife, the apartment becomes a house. Then kid one shows up. And so everything grows and the cost of living grows. And so you try and live a responsible and safe life as best you can. So there's that side of it, which is the reality. Then the parents get older and you got to take care of everybody, so there's all these things that kick in. But ultimately, my goal for trying to be successful for me was not only trying to make a living in the music industry, which is in itself a challenge, and I mean, quite a challenge at that, but I wanted to work with people that push it. I didn't want to just do the same thing. I wanted to keep moving. I wanted to be excited. I didn't want it to be a job. I put so much time and effort into everything I do that if it was anything other than what I loved, it would be a miserable experience because it's just, if I had to dig ditches for a living and I had to go out there every day and do the time, I don't even think I'd be on this planet. You know what I mean? So the fact that I wanted to work with the people that I did and pick and choose the jobs that I wanted to. That was kind of a huge part of the reward, part of the lifestyle that I aspired to. And I didn't want to tour because once I had kids, like any garden, you need to be there to tend to it if you really want to get the maximum result. At least I do. And I have friends that tour and they do a great job of it. They have a great family and all that stuff too. But there's just something about being there when, on the most, for sometimes the small stuff and sometimes the big stuff. And it's really hard when you're, hey, I'm in Brisbane, Australia. Yeah, okay, so somebody broke into the car. Oh, oof, okay, well, here's what you do. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a lot easier to be on site. And I didn't want to miss the things. Our kids, as they get older, there's just certain things that are of that age. And once they're gone, they're gone. When I was younger, I would walk into school and they'd hold my hand. And then now they're like, They put their goth eyeliner on and they don't want anything to do with it, So at least I got to have those moments and I can't get them back. So for me, that was huge. But anyways, I started working with a company, Extreme, maybe over 23, 24, 25 years ago. And it was originally these two guys, Russell and Dolph. And then eventually it just became Russell, which is Russell Emmanuel. He's the CEO of that. And I liked them because they were wild, which kind of fit my personality. So I definitely am not a person that likes to draw in the lines. There's a whole world of people that are willing to do that and are super into it. That just is sheer boredom for me. So I had been doing a lot of television. I was doing all the guitar stuff. I had done all those guitar records. I did the touring. I got to do everything from the clubs to the theaters to the stadiums to the outdoor festivals. I had those experiences.
You did it when you had the energy as well. The physical energy.
Yeah, because it's exciting. It's like it's a new challenge. So you do it. But then after a while, to be honest with you, playing the stadiums was kind of the coldest of them all. Because it was like, you're so removed and there's this big barrier. It's funny, you can affect and sway the crowd a lot, but at the same time, you can't. Some of my best gigs were when I were playing in little indie bands and tattoo parlors where we had so many people that literally there wasn't even enough room for a stomp box pedal. You're just playing and everybody's sweaty and the people's shit's knocking over and there's, and it's in a room that holds 200 people and there's 350. And if the fire breaks out, we're all done. And people are just going for it and you're just going crazy. And I remember playing a show and people were getting in fights and you're punching people with one hand and strumming with the next. And then one guy hits his girlfriend and you're like, so you're clocking it. I mean, it was just like, it was wild. It was awesome. And then you're playing a stadium, you're outdoors and the sound goes out and doesn't come back, which is great. You can play incredibly loud, which is pretty awesome too. But it's just a disconnect. But I needed to have that experience to know. And to be honest with you, once you've done your 10th, your 15th, your 20th stadium show, it started to feel like a job. It wasn't what I thought it was. And to be honest with you, being famous isn't what you think it is. What I realized is I wanted to be respected amongst my peers. I wanted to be respected amongst people that could differentiate between cool stuff and just run-of-the-mill stock. Whereas being truly famous is you're famous for everybody. You're famous for the low end of the spectrum and the high end of the spectrum. And it's a different thing. I tried to do really cool things when I couldn't do things. You got to worry about this and that and people's, lawsuits and this. It's like it's just a lot of stuff that goes with it that takes the wind out of it. So anyways, I had been doing all the guitar stuff. Then I started doing the production stuff, meaning I was producing records for people.
Quick sideline. Did you do some stuff with Anthony Michael Hall, as in John Hughes Breakfast Club Anthony Michael Hall?
Oh, yeah. He's a really super nice guy. Really, really nice, really talented, actually. What I was doing, because, I lived in California. And so when I was younger and in the scene, I had friends and a lot of them were actors and actresses. And so I was like, as the music industry changes, you have to change with it. It's in constant flux. Right now, the industry is the shadow of what it once was. It's in constant flux. It's becoming social media driven and it's getting harder. Cable television is dying down. So therefore the licensing's changing. Everything changes on a daily basis. So you have to have enough tools in your skill set to be able to adapt. So you're known for whatever kind of gets the light shined on it the brightest. For example, if you're an elite gymnast, and you're in the Olympics, well, then you're known as a gymnast. But if you happen to have the voice of an angel like Pavarotti and then you're selling millions of records, well, then you're the gymnast that sings, So it just really comes down to what gets the attention. And so I took the opportunity to do the guitar stuff because I was 15 years old. I was living in Middletown, Connecticut. And Connecticut was a great place to grow up, but it was very limited as far as opportunities. My dad did flooring. So I had learned all those skills in order to survive, because we never had any money, so we could never afford nice cars. So we had to buy not nice cars. And then I had to learn to fix them. So cars would break down. I'd have to take the car apart, learn to fix. That was when you could fix cars.
Now you plug them in and the computer tells you what's wrong.
Yeah, I have one that plugs in. It's crazy. You know what I mean? My wife loves it. I'm like, eh. So you learn all these skills. Once again, it's just pure survival. And it's like, okay, I can't afford a nice car, so I'll buy a junk car and I'll spend more money on a monthly basis trying to keep that thing running than had I just bought a new car and made the payments, but I just didn't have the money to make the payments at the time. So you learn these lessons of survival, and that is kind of what life becomes. It becomes one foot in front of another, because those are the opportunities that I wasn't born into I wasn't born into royalty, so I had to make it work. My parents were incredibly wild, and as wild as they were, and as much carnage that came with that, in the big picture, they had it right. It was truly, there was love. There was so much love there, and they put the time in. They did the hard work. Do you know what I mean? Even if they didn't have necessarily the tools or the skill set for certain things, they did have the big picture right. They did. My parents, if they were dead broke down to their last penny and you dropped your wallet and it had $1,000 cash in it, you'd get a wallet back with $1,000 cash in it. That's who they were at their core. So you learned principally, you had these ethics, because if you don't have that in life, life is going to push and pull you. I mean, the best analogy is like when you go swimming on the beach and you put your towel down and you're out in the water and you're having fun and, it's great. And then you look and your towel is way down on the beach. You're like, what just happened? That is kind of how life is. So if you don't have something to kind of anchor you, it becomes interesting. But there was chaos and carnage that came with that was very cool. But so in short, I was given opportunities. I just took those opportunities and ran with it. And originally it was as a guitarist. So people knew me, hey, this is a guitar guy. But I was ultimately always kind of an artist or a musician. It was always kind of song-based or creative-based. So going into the TV and film thing was a great thing for me, because it gave me a chance to kind of really fall into what I felt was my strength. And using the guitar to help accentuate that was cool, but I didn't rely on it. So for years, I spent a whole life building a really particular guitar style, that was very kind of unique in its own way. And I went into film, didn't even use it in the beginning.
Was that refreshing for you? Like being a creative person, a whole new palette?
I didn't think about it. I mean, I was just trying to make a list. I was just trying to
adapt and survive, basically.
Yeah. Whenever people, I watch all these documentaries and everybody sounds so prolific. And of course, every puzzle piece fits. That's all bullshit, man. They're just trying to figure it out. And you don't hear about the failures. You just hear about the successes. You know what I mean? And then they come off sounding like some kind of guru that had a plan. There's no plan. At least I don't think so. I think it's just, I don't know, I'll start a podcast. Let me see if I can get some people on it. Okay, cool. And then it becomes a thing. And then, so at least that's been my life experience. I'm just trying to be honest with people, because I hope that will encourage people to move forward in their chosen profession, or just attack whatever it is that needs to happen, because it makes for great stories and all the, everybody, come off sounding like I was destined to do this. Destined to be a plumber too, if I wasn't careful,
Well, growing up in Connecticut, what came first though, guitar or BMX?
BMX.
Really?
Hell yeah. BMX was the jam, dude, because you're a kid. And keep in mind, it was a different time. My parents knew I was basically a good kid. I didn't really get into any trouble of note. Yeah, we lit shit on fire with gasoline, but that was just, redneck activities. That's just what we did, Basically, yeah, I would get up in the morning, eat a bowl of cereal, and I would drive that bike for, sometimes I would drive till it would be well after dark. Sometimes I would just drive into different counties and have friends there. I wouldn't even come home. My parents, no one gave a shit. It was fine, because they knew it was just different times, and so it was just freedom. I loved it. Being a kid, it was amazing. We would just go and we figured it out on our own. And I was super hot on BMX. My ambition was to become a professional BMX racer.
So it was the racing and not the tricks.
Yeah, because what happened when I was small, I was really small and I was fast as shit, so this was all like pre-puberty, you know what I mean? So I had kind of the edge on everybody, and yeah, tricks were starting to come in gear, but it was nothing like it was now. This was literally just like sprinting around the track, and you do the berms and the hills and the bumps and stuff, and we had big ones. You could jump, you could do a 15-foot. You could crank on them. But the problem is when you were in the air, you weren't pedaling. So the reality was, if you really wanted to get your speed down, you had to keep at least your back tire on the ground. Because the more in the air, it was always flashy. Everybody loved, when I was in front, then you'd hit all the hoops there and you'd crush it in the air. You'd be, table topping and people would go lose their shit. The problem is the guys on the ground would actually be catching up when you did that. So you had to be ahead enough to do it. But anyways, I did it, and then I ended up breaking my elbow riding some stupid go-kart that, I built with a friend of mine.
So not even on a BMX?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, all that drama. I fell off and I knew that I had broke it. So I just went home and I didn't say anything. And I woke up the next morning and my right elbow was the size of like a small grapefruit. And so I walk into my parents' room and I'm like, hey, I think I broke my elbow. My dad's like, you're fine. Don't worry about it. And then I passed out and it hit my head. And so my parents were all pissed because they had to take me to 2 doctors, 1 to fix the elbow and 2 to get stitches. And then what I did is I had the thing, they put it in a sling. But, of course, being a kid, you wanted to be out, during the day. And so it was killing me because I couldn't do anything I couldn't ride. I was riding the bike one-handed, but you couldn't race, so we were just driving around. And then it just wasn't as fun because you drive around with your friends, but your friends were all we would literally jump over cars. When you look back at it now, you're like, that's insanity. But that was just, once again, we were like these feral kids that ran around, but not in a bad way. We weren't like causing damage, or at least we didn't think we were probably stealing some wood to jump the car, whatever it was. And, and obviously it wasn't our car, but we didn't mess the cars up. We were really well intended. We were just bananas. Anyways, it wasn't fun because my friends could all do that. And I'm sitting there. So what I would do is I would just go home and I could just take the guitar. I could take it out of the sling and hold it. So I started playing guitar. My dad gave me a guitar when I was 9, and I I played a little bit, but it was like a wall hanger. I didn't really care. It was actually a guitar called a Wish guitar. It was made by a custom maker, some guy probably out of Connecticut somewhere in the woods, but his last name was Wish, and it looked like an elf shoe. It was crazy. I remember it had almost like a Firebird kind of type headstock, but had a really weird body shape. It was all pointy and stuff. And then it took 6 weeks for the elbow to heal, or whatever it was, 4 weeks, I don't remember. But by that time, I was kind of starting to get into guitar a little bit. And then just magically, it just kind of happened where when I got back on the bike, this arm was wasn't as strong as this one because it had been sitting in the cast for 6 weeks. And then also by that time, kids were starting to hit puberty and everybody was kind of starting to get fast. All of a sudden, I wasn't that special anymore. And what I realized is that when you're ahead of the pack, it's a metaphor for kind of like life. When you're ahead of the pack, you can do your thing. It's a lot easier to be in front. Once you're behind, when you're in second or third position, it's fucking almost impossible to get out of the pack. So it was kind of like a metaphor for life. Like if you can stay out of trouble and you can kind of get enough momentum, you can kind of do a thing. But man, once you're back riding with everybody, it was a bloodbath just to even get out of here. So it was interesting. So it was kind of life teaching me a lesson without even realizing it. Plus the view from second position ain't so fun,
Was you doing pretty good with BMX? Didn't you win some trophies and stuff?
Oh yeah, no, I won, for a kid, I won a shit ton of trophies, or whatever, at least my version of it. I look back on the photos, there's like 20 of them. In my mind, it was like 1,000,000, but I don't know. I never kept the trophies. I'm not an awards guy. Listen, if you want to give me an award, I will graciously and gladly accept the reward, and I'm truly grateful for it. But I guess I have a gold record somewhere. I guess I have trophies. I don't even know where they are. My point is, how do you give somebody an award for art? That's weird to me. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be one thing if we were runners and I could outrun you, then all right, man, let me get my running award because I'm faster than you. But with art, I don't know. I get it. It's a business. You take the award and it brings your cachet up. But when the house is burning, I'm not running in to grab awards. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean?
What was your BMX of choice?
Okay, well, we didn't have any money. So it was like a knockoff like Mongoose or something like that. It was some B brand. It was made of chromoly, which was cool.
But you made it work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because we didn't have any money. But the best part of the story is my brother, Josh, who's about 2 years younger. When we were younger, we used to rub all the time because he wanted to hang out with me. And I was like, dude, back up.
2 years is a big difference back then.
Yeah. Back then it was like, dude. But he's like my height, but that kid is like he's always been farm strong. You know what I mean? So my brother had a steel bike. That thing must have weighed 40 pounds. Literally, I think it was built out of cinder blocks. And he was so wild. When he would ride those bikes, my brother would finish about 3 bike lengths better because he was just so strong. He was just such a natural athlete. He was like a brute.
Was it like the Les Paul of BMXs, like super heavy?
Yeah, like a 70s Norland Les Paul of it, pancake body and everything. And he was such a brute. He just plowed through. So he was really the one that had the star talent, but he didn't give a shit. He'd win them and then he would be like, fuck these guys. He just didn't care, So we were just like wild kids. When I look back on it now, I was like, Jesus. Yeah, how we ended up even surviving is just crazy. I got stories that are just like, I don't even know what's legal. It's great. But they're all good-hearted. There's definitely some close calls, but that's just life stuff. And there was nothing like. So anyways, that was it. So then BMX kind of ran its place because I realized, I'm not really that special now. And then kids were getting good and then they were getting really good. Plus then I started getting taller. So I started playing guitar. And then from 13, I took it serious because that's when I broke my elbow. And from 13 to 14, I had the sound locked. Like whatever it was I was going to do. When I say the sound locked, meaning that was what I could do. Meaning I tried to do a Van Halen thing. I couldn't. I tried to do a Steve Morse thing. I tried to mimic my influences and I did the best I could, but it was just run through like a filter. Everything, like I'd start with this and I'd get it filtered and it just ended up sounding like me. So the only thing I'm going to give myself credit for is I realized like, okay, rather than spending all my time trying to emulate somebody else, clearly this is going to be where I put it. Let me just perfect that. And perfect that meaning like, listen, constantly a student. I still to this day wake up and realize my mind is kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch. So every day, because I'm not a learned student of the music, like I didn't go to school and take theory and counter theory, and I never learned any of that stuff ever. I did take a couple early guitar lessons by this guy, Ray D. Champlain, who was great. He ran this store called Creative Strings, but I took him because he was just very proficient at it. And my dad's like, you should learn a little something. But I was a horrible student because I didn't really take it serious. And when I grew up, it was either like, there was like a little mini rivalry. You were either like a jazz guy, you listened to all the Spyro Gyra and all these guys, and you thought these guys were so cool, the Jockos. And I was like, and I liked them, but it just didn't move my meter. Then I heard like fucking Deep Purple. I was like, oh shit. I heard Johnny Winter. I was like, nah, I like this. This fucking blonde guy with a cape has got a top hat on looking like fucking like, Abraham Lincoln, white Firebird. I was like, nah, this.
I need a superhero like this. That's what I need.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I like the bare knuckles rock and I love the boogie stuff. So here's the crazy story. When I was younger, you'd go to the movie theaters and they would have a thing before the movie started to get your popcorn. And it had this groove. And I fucking would go crazy. I'd be like dancing, I was like fucking popping and locking or whatever. I don't know, whatever the move was at the time. I'd hear that shuffle and I would lose my shit on that, and I don't know what it was. It was just like, there was like a dancing ball and you'd sing along to it. So whatever that was inherently, I loved the boogie. I loved the swing. Whatever the swing was, that was kind of my thing. I always gravitated to that. And I don't know why. My mom used to play ragtime piano, the Scott Joplin rags. And it's funny, she doesn't remember playing it, and I don't remember how good it was because I was a kid. But my parents, everybody had, it's just natural. So that's what moved me. Whereas the jazz stuff felt more thought out. And I'm not saying it was. And of course, there's good, there's bad and ugly. And the good stuff is fucking amazing, of course. But at the end of the day, I just didn't give a shit. You know what I mean? I was a rock guy, and that was it. Rocker at heart. Just still am. Punk, I liked the punk. I liked the energy and the wildness of punk. The punk at the time, the early stuff wasn't as proficient. I really liked the guitar stuff because that's kind of what I was at. Like the 80s was a rough time because there just wasn't a lot of heavy lifting for the guitar to be done. You know what I mean? So I gravitated towards that. So that was kind of like my upbringing. Then I started getting into, I always recorded. So I always had one foot in production because I could never afford to go to a studio. We never had any money.
Again, adapt and survive.
Correct. Like I'd have like a cool old guitar because that's all we could afford. And then I'd have it for about 28 days. And then we'd be like, at the end of the month, we're like, well, we got to pay the rent. And then I'd sell the guitar. I've had 59 Les Pauls. I've had 63 Strats. I can't even tell you the list. I've got pictures of it all somewhere. I put it up on Instagram because I think people enjoy it, but no one wants to live in the past. I mean, it's depressing. You know what I mean?
If you've got the photos, that's all you need. That's what I'm at that point now. I'm from a family of hoarders. It's like, want to save everything, but now I'm at the point of enjoy it, take a photo of it, get rid of it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I go through phases. Like when I bought my first house, I sold every guitar I ever owned except one. The Hard Rock Cafe was buying them and it was like all this stuff. And I just think maybe because I grew up with nothing that you don't get attached to things because at the end of the day, if the boat's sinking, if the plane can't lift off, you got to throw something out of the plane. It's always whatever. So maybe that's a good thing. You know what I mean? Like I said, if the house is burning, man, I'm getting the kids out. I guess I got to get the wife out. That's fine. And then we go for the pets. And then after that, fuck it, get some marshmallows. Let's watch it burn.
Get some marshmallows.
What are you going to do? You know what I mean? It is. I mean, just like in life, we go through life and try being in a family and someone gets sick, real sick. You start realizing real quick that none of this shit matters, man. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the good stuff. Like I said, I've definitely got, I've got them champagne tastes. But at the end of the day, I don't need gold knobs on my casket, dude. I'm fine, man.
You say you liked all that kind of boogie swing stuff. Is that what you kind of picked up on when you heard Van Halen?
I don't know. I just know I liked it, man. I put it in my Walkman and I'd walk to school. That shit, when I heard that stuff, that was like smoking meth, man. That was like, holy shit. Because everybody, especially the younger people now, everything is so proficient. You guys are like, yeah. At the time, it was like seeing a fucking alien come down and breakdance in front of you. You're like, what the fuck just happened? It was so far ahead of anything just in its approach. And most importantly, that sound. It was the sound for me that did it. The sound was so on fire that everything sounded good. He had it locked. They had it down. And I don't know if it was just by circumstance. I don't know. I can't tell you. I wasn't there. I just know that, I heard that and it was amazing. And it was just a different time. Like guitar was on the forefront. So guitar was given a chance to develop. It wasn't like it is now where you put something up on SoundCloud. If it doesn't gain traction, you're out. There was a start point. There was a cultivation period. You could move stuff. You could really hear people progress. I mean, you listen to early Fleetwood Mac. You're like, okay, and that was like a boogie blues band. And then it evolves into like this pop band. And you're like, it just changed. Jethro Tull in the beginning wasn't, the Jethro Tull of note. Whereas now you don't have that. And I get it. Listen, everything changes. It's all good. It's all music. If people are enjoying it, I'm happy. I don't hate anything. Stuff I just don't care for.
It's just not for you. I'm at that point now. Sometimes it's like, I just don't get it that much. It's certainly not for me because other people are loving it.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't like a lot of the current music. And it's just, listen, this guy, John Sticks, told me, because he was a writer, he actually produced some of my early records. We would like co-produce these records. And in the beginning, I would rub because I had such a vision. I was like, oh, it's got to be this way. And he's like, try this, try that. And it's just, when you're young, you're like, oh, you're just trying to get your point across. And so it's actually turned out to be a great friendship. And I really respected the opportunities that he gave me and the fact that he brought a fresh set of ears and eyes to it, which was great. But I remember him telling me, he said, hey man, every generation wants their own. He was right. Meaning like no one wants to drive, you don't want to drive your dad's car. You want your car. You know what I mean? And your kids aren't going to want your car. And part of being an artist is finding a way to maximize what's happening. Like for example, right now, the current state of music, it's either hip hop, pop, and country isn't really country. Country's kind of pop. But even like, let's take something current. You've got a drum machine, 808. So you got, kick, sub kick. You've got a hi-hat, a trap hi-hat beat. You've got a sub keyboard. And then you've got kind of like a cadence of a vocal. It's not even really, they're not even melodic based now. A lot of it's just rapping and they're doing the lyrics. So really you're listening to fucking rudiments out of vocals. So now there's no mid-range anymore. Guitars used to eat that space. There isn't that now. The current music, if you go to any apartment complex and listen to what people are playing in their cars as they drive by, that's really the masses now. And so when you listen to it, mid-range isn't what it used to be. So even when you go to mix stuff and you go to create stuff, I have to now create music that comes across on little earbuds and iPhones and in your speakers. And so you have to find a way of doing that when there really isn't a shit ton that speaks in that range. So think about that, just creatively. So content is issue, sonics is another issue, and you just have to kind of find a way of figuring it out. Or you can look at it like this. As an artist, you can say, hey, that's great that that's not happening. I'm going to be the person that brings that to the table. You can do that too. I'm sure if, Kanye and Van Halen got together, it'd be fucking cool. You know what I mean?
That'd be interesting, man.
Interesting, right? Who knows? It could be amazing.
Wasn't your first concert the Van Halen 1984 tour?
Well, my first concert of all time was when I was a baby. My parents brought me to an Allman Brothers concert in a paper bag.
As they do, right?
Yeah.
Weren't kids not allowed?
Well, they wanted to bring their dog too, and they didn't think they could get two through. So clearly they prioritized and wanted to bring the dog.
Oh, yeah, it'd be cruel to put the dog in the paper bag.
Yeah, so they stuck me in the paper bag to sneak me in, which I'm not sure what they were thinking.
Was you a heavy sleeper? Like, blues will be fine, put him in the bag.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine. I got pictures of me sleeping in kick drums during rehearsals. There's one funny one where I'm like a baby in an acoustic guitar case, and you can tell it's like a shitty guitar case too, which is pretty sweet. So, yeah, and my parents were like, yeah, you'd be fine. We would just play and you'd just sleep. Like, this is how crazy it was. My dad decided to build his own house in Connecticut. He built it, and he didn't have a roof on it. He built it himself. So, of course, what do you do when you don't have a roof on your house? You decide to throw a party. So he threw a party, and where they were like 3 counties would all kind of meet at this one little area, which is where his house was. So it was awesome because if you called the cops, no cops wanted to come out and break up the party because it was deep in the woods. Like, it was like a couple miles in. So they would have these massive jams all night, and it was by a lake. And so because there was no roof on it, the house basically became this massive speaker. So in essence, they were getting calls from like 3 counties away, and the music would travel across the lake. Imagine just like Allman Brothers jam band going on. And we'd just be sleeping in the guitar case over. We didn't give a shit. That was my life.
And that was your first gig, Allman Brothers in a bag.
Yeah, I know. I did a podcast on my friend Dweezil's show, and I told him the story, and he hadn't heard it, and we were laughing. So I called my mom and she's like, yeah. And I said, well, why was I in the bag? And she goes, well, I think we had the dog with us. That was it. But my first real show that I can remember was Van Halen 1984.
Was that a game changer for you?
I was already committed. I was already part of the team. I mean, the game changer was was listening to the music, in essence, like going to school. So the way it was at my house, it was crazy. But my dad would get up in the morning before he'd go to work and he would play music every morning. And I don't know why, just, he was like an audiophile. He had these like speakers and it was kind of weird because he did like flooring. So like what flooring guy gets up and does music? But he would play everything. So sometimes we had like Iron Maiden. I remember Peace of Mind was like the record we listened to. And then sometimes it was Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez. And then it would be like James Cotton, all that stuff. So we just had this vast array of all these different. So I wake up and I always heard it. And so music was the whole game for us. We just loved it. And then, like I said, we'd be dead broke, but they'd always find a way to get me the stuff that I needed for sure. So we'd be dead broke, but I'd get like a Kramer or some cool shit like that. Or my parents bought me a Sony Walkman because I knew I was into music. And so then I would make cassettes. And I remember walking to school and I'd be listening to like Ozzy Osbourne, like Diary of a Madman, like going through the woods because I would cut through the woods and I'd put the music on. It would be like spooky and shit. It was like Stranger Things, kind of like it had that vibe to us. Like, and my imagination would run fucking wild. And it was great. So I would live almost in like this, I'd be like, the devil's coming and all this shit. And we'd fucking laughing at it. We thought it was hilarious. We'd go at night and put on all the music and walk through the woods. It was just like, it was just this amazing, crazy upbringing that you just don't get now because now everything is so perfect with technology that you miss this shit. I mean, that was the whole thing. I'd put Walkman, I'd be in school listening and the kids would be in the back fighting. And I was in a whole alternate.
You're transported.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I posted it, but I found one of my teaching, like you get like a status report. I got like a 0, 55 and a 61. Like I had no interest in going to school. I would have left school at, 10 years old if I could have. None. Zilch, zip, zing. There was nothing that kept my interest in any way, shape, or form because I'm in school. School is, this kind of structured thing. And then in my own world, it was fucking amazing. So I just wanted to get back to doing what I wanted to do. Now, I will say for anyone that, that's listening, that's younger, looking back on it now, what I would do, my recommendation would be this. While you're at this point in your life, wherever it is, do the things that are most age appropriate. Meaning like now that I'm in my 50s, let's say my early 50s, but my chances of going back and learning stuff that I could have learned then and my mind being so readily to absorb it, I truly wish I had learned more. I wish I learned more musically. I wish I learned more just even with English. Like, for example, I sucked at English because I didn't give a shit. I'm like, why am I reading this old shit? Who cares? This is lame. Because I'd have a better vocabulary. I'd have a better understanding of how to write lyrics and do all this stuff. Like, I really feel like I missed the boat on some of that stuff. I'm not saying I don't get it there, but I have to put so much effort into it that I think it would have been a lot easier had I spent the time learning the basic blocks. But I was so worried about if I learn these rules, then I'm going to work within these gold lines that I wanted to be able to break the rules. And what I realized is me personally, I think naturally that's going to happen anyways. So I wish I had taken a little bit more time because now I'm raising family. I've got to deal with insurance and, this and that. And my world is now, I don't have 8 hours a day to go back and study. So that's not going to happen.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, sir.
Well, that's why I'm throwing it out there because, listen, at the end of the day, here's what I'd like to see in life. I want to see people do well. I think it's great. I'm excited about it. I'm inspired by it. When I see somebody that's incredible on their instrument, I'm not jealous in the least. I'm fucking hyped. I'm like, dang. I'm like, props to you, young lady or young man, whatever it is. I'm a fan. You know what I mean? I love it. So the better you are, the better it is for everybody. And it's inspiring. And maybe some of that will rub off on me. And maybe I can incorporate that into my soup. And maybe my recipe will be stronger. I've never been one of these people that, hoards the stuff. It's like I've had to kind of figure out a lot of it the hard way because we didn't have YouTube. So try to figure out Eruption when you don't even know what's going on. It sounds like a keyboard. I'm like, what is happening? I used to work at a music store and I'd watch people I'm like, holy shit, you can put a second hand on a guitar? Dang, I
spoke to people and they said everybody used to learn Eruption in different places because they were just learning it by ear.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it was crazy. It was crazy. So here's the pros and the cons, though. I was trying to figure it out and clearly failed miserably, but I stumbled across something else, which became kind of my thing. So had I not been trying, had I just gone onto YouTube and clicked on the one with the most views and there's somebody laying it out for me, okay, congratulations. You can now play Eruption, which so can every person on the planet at this point. So to me, what I really respected and my favorites of all time were people that were unique. It's not that hard. You just have to be yourself, whatever that is, good, bad, or ugly. You'd be amazed. I like guitar players that are people are like, that guy's kind of clunky. I'm like, I love it. If they just move the needle, I'm in. So it's not that complicated. It's just that simple. That's what I like, me personally. But to each their own. Like I said, some people buy their art in a mall and they love that shit. So, there you go.
Your journey's been quite unconventional. I mean, you spoke many times how you got from Connecticut to LA doing the NAMM show and getting noticed there, and you'd eventually get picked up and signed to a label formed by Guitar for the Practicing Musician, which was a magazine which we all brought and learnt the tab from.
Yeah.
And you did your first instrumental album when you was like 19 years old, Never Look Back. I mean, it was a genius move by the magazine, as they had like a direct line to the kind of people that would appeal to. If you'd have been on, let's say, a regular label doing an instrumental album, they'd have been paying big dollar to advertise in that magazine.
Totally. Well, think about it. At the time, nothing really changes. At the end of the day, there's really nothing new under the sun. The magazines were just the social media of our time. And so what I realized real early on, because keep in mind, the advantage of having, I guess you say come up, I don't want to say in the streets because it makes it sound like I'm some kind of rapper, but the point of coming up with, let's say the opportunities is you're forced to create your own, which is probably no different than it is now in all honesty. So what happened was I realized that you basically had 3 magazines, and that was everybody's pipeline into let's call it the guitar world. And even though the guitar world wasn't my end goal, it was a chance. So when I was 15, I handed in this tape that was a cassette tape that came from me demonstrating this guitar company because I wanted to get an endorsement and I wanted a free guitar because that was better than what I had. So that becomes, hey, now we can make a CD, which is better than handing out a black and white picture on a cassette. Now I got a color photo on a CD. Oh man, that's an upgrade. And it all just became like that thing. But what I realized really early on, it wasn't how popular you were, how many albums you were selling. It was how popular you were perceived to be. Therefore, figure like what I would do, I'd get in the magazine, so there was an ad, and then I had endorsements. So I'd get another guitar to add, maybe a pickup ad. So I could be in the magazine potentially maybe 3 times, full page, 5-color, 4-color ads. So let's take the hero of the time, let's say a Steve Vai, okay, or whoever, an Yngwie Malmsteen, So Yngwie's on the cover, then they give him an article shot and maybe 2 other shots, and then, so he's in it, let's say 3 or 4 times, maybe even 5, but I could be in it like 3, you know what I mean? And I was full page. So think of it like this, and I say this whenever I'm interviewed. When you meet people that let's say, are is on TV, everybody has to fill the same space. So I can't tell you how many times I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. They're teeny, but on the screen, everybody's the same size. So it's kind of like that in the magazine. If Van Halen's on the cover and then you open up the next page and there's me, well, then how far off can I be? And so he's selling, whoever, let's say Steve Vai or I'm on an Yngwie kick lately. So let's say Yngwie's selling, 1,000 units a week. I'm selling maybe 50, but it doesn't matter, so that becomes the thing. And so I just basically worked that angle. I would manipulate that to try and do the best I could. Now, also keep in mind this, there was 3 magazines, but because I was signed to Cherry Lane, I was blackballed by the other 2. They would not touch me because what it came down to was when tablature came out, which was great for people like me because I didn't, this was pre-internet. So if you wanted to learn, let's say, Sweet Child of Mine or whatever it was, for someone that was, just as lazy as I was, that did not know how to read, did not know anything about music, handing me that shit was like handing me something in a different language. But I could figure out the tablature pretty easy. That was like, that's more my speed. So Cherry Lane had the publishing company. They had Nirvana, Metallica, all that stuff. You had to you couldn't hold a monopoly on it. So what they would do is, so when Guitar for the Practicing Musician came out, who I was signed to, they do Sweet Child of Mine, And then when, let's say, Guitar World wanted one, they'd give them like some fucking B-brand song, like, hey man, here's a song no one gives a shit about, and you can have that. These guys were fighting back. The rivalry was real. So what happened was I was caught up in that, which was, live by the sword, die by the sword. That's fine. And I've actually talked to some of the writers. And they were like, listen, man, we really like your shit, but we just can't. So my way around that was I would do the endorsements and so the advertising. So I could never get an article. I really liked Guitar Player because that was the one I grew up with. And Guitar Player wouldn't really write about me. I was always bummed about that.
Like Nuno's on the cover of Guitar Player. I want to be on there.
That's what I'm thinking, man. Throw me a little, but it's fine. I understood. And at the time I didn't because I was, you're young. You're just like, man, you take the rivalry so seriously. Then you get old and realize I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? But I get it. I'm just trying to look at it from their point of view too. So anyways, all this stuff is just fun to know behind the scenes. That was the deal with it. But ultimately it all got me to this television and film, which is, so the crazy part is this. For the last 20, 25 years, I've been doing television and film, and I've had more success at that than I've had at any of it by far. And the crazy part is I've actually gotten into more households doing that way than probably most people that you've seen on MTV. It's nuts. It's just like a different way of doing it. You're not in front of the camera. You're not Taylor Swift. But at the same time, it's allowed me to challenge and push, and I can actually really affect change as far as musically doing stuff that way. Like, we got to create a lot of stuff and do stuff that, you're onto stuff when people are copying you. That's when you know you've got it. And the crazy part is it's all behind the scenes, but it became kind of like the last bastion of making music that would interest me enough to want to do it without having to tour per se. Yes, listen, if you're playing guitar in the Foo Fighters, I'm sure that is an amazing opportunity. I'm sure that's a great band and they're really nice guys, and I get it. But there's only so many gigs like that, and even if you're lucky enough to get a job like that, when I mean lucky, I mean obviously these are qualified people, they deserve it, don't get me wrong. When I mean lucky, meaning like they're fortunate enough to get like a dream job like that, keep in mind they still got to tour, they got to get on the airplane, they got to get on the bus, and let me tell you, traveling is dangerous and it's tiring, and it takes a toll. So I've always been super excited for anybody that's gotten those gigs, because trust me when I say they're earning every dime. That is for sure. Like even when I see guys on Instagram and they get all these old guitars, and I mean, like, good for them, man. They are earning it. Trust me. Nobody's waking up and getting any free meals. That is not the case. So I just say good on everybody and keep it moving. So TV and film really became my thing. And the crazy part is you can actually hear it. If you go to, like, let's say extrememusic.com, think of the band like Extreme, and just pull my name up as a composer search, there's got to be maybe 300 tracks there,
The list is insane.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And the same track gets licensed to different things as well.
Think of it like this. Think of it like glorified stock photography, but it's on an exceptionally high level. For example, let's say you want to shoot in New York and you want a picture of the Statue of Liberty, but you don't want to pull the permits and it's going to cost you, let's say, $200,000 just to be able to film there. And you're putting your movie together. You don't want to spend $200,000 on one shot. So you go to a library that has footage of the Statue of Liberty and you use that. You pay them a whole lot less than what it would cost you. And that's what you get. The upside is anybody can license it. You can license the Statue of Liberty. I can license, Well, it's like that with music. And so luckily, the guys at Extreme, especially Russell. Russell's really the mastermind there, and he was real smart and a genius at not only getting the music to the level it needs to be at, but a genius in the marketing of it. So what he would do is, think of it like this. You go to a library. Let's say I take you to the New York Library. That thing has got to be a block long of just books. It just goes on and on and on. And I said, you can have any book you want. You wouldn't even know where to start. You'd be like, I don't know. Do I want a book on cats? Do I want a book on engines? I don't know. You know what I mean? So what they were great at with Extreme is they packaged so well, and they did very small quantities of super top-notch stuff. So when I met them, I was already making records for people. And I was working with all these little actors and actresses because in my mind, I'm like, well, if I'm going to make a record, let me make it for somebody that's already kind of got a reputation, because that way at least we have a fan base to start off of. That was my thought process, because I would attack every record like I was making the last record on earth. So when they ran across me, I had already done the session stuff. I had already worked with all the top producers just as a guitarist. Like when I did a Melissa Etheridge record, I worked on that record for 45 days. So for 45 days, I got a master class in engineering and production, watching the top of the food chain producers do that shit. I'd work with all the top session guys. So after a while, you just learn all the tricks. You learn all, parallel compression. Yep, got it. No problem. You start figuring all this out. This is how you make a record. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. After you've worked with 4 or 5 different producers, you start seeing, hey, they all kind of do it like this. Maybe there's something to it, and then I would work with different artists, and especially like a lot of bands, like they'd have a band, right? And the band was great, but sometimes some of the players weren't quite up to the task. So a lot of times you have to come in and just like touch a couple things up, or, kind of a little behind the scenes, a little, let's call it reinforcing the structure. So you get to work with different bands and you see how they do it. Some people build from the bottom up, some people build from the top down, some people build from the middle out. You're basically just getting this tutorial of how to do this stuff. So when I came across them, I was making records. They came across me via my friend Dweezil. We took on a project together. We were always trying to find stuff to work on, but between his schedule and my schedule, it's just hard. We'd hang out because we'd be so like, all right, we don't want to, we'd hang out and do the most fun stuff, but we never got a chance to work on stuff because it was just, he was busy, I was busy. We were just fighting to find time. This project comes along. He takes it on and they wanted 10 tracks. And he's like, dude, 10 tracks is turning out to be a lot. He says, let's work on it together. That was right about when he was going to kind of go start doing his dad's material on the road. And it was very intensive as far as learning the stuff. and we had taken on the project and we had a deadline. I said, listen, let's just do this. Let's divide it up. I'll work on half, you work on half, and we'll try and meet in the middle on a song or two. So I did it. We worked on one song together. I did mine and I handed mine in. They were real happy with it. They're like, yep, this is exactly what we want. And this sounds right. And so then they were so wild. My fear with doing the television, I just didn't want to do anything corporate because it's just the boredom is brutal. You know what I mean? These guys were so wild. As a matter of fact, I'd start messing with them. Like I would take a track and I'd try and make it as wild as possible. And I'd send it in like, oh, I can't wait to hear on this. And they'd be like, yeah, that's cool. Can we get more? I'm like, really?
These are my kind of guys.
Yeah, exactly. So we just kept upping it. And it was like, it was a game of chicken. It was like, who's going to blink first, you know? And so in the beginning, you kind of do it. You put it out there and it takes a minute to get a response. Meaning, you know, it may take a year or two because you put it in this catalog. People have to kind of find out about it. Then they use it. And, you know, every project takes months to get together. So a year and a half later, money starts coming in. And then as more money comes in, you can start investing more of your time into that project. So I'm paralleling with other stuff as well. But as the money's coming in, I'm like, oh, yeah, you know, I don't have to do that now. I can kind of stay more focused on here, which is what I wanted to do. And they kept giving me the craziest projects. Like I was doing speed metal at one point. I was cranking those tempos so fast just to see when, you know.
Was you constantly learning all the time, or are you constantly learning?
Dude, I wake up every day until you're throwing dirt over me, I'll be learning. You know what I mean? So that is the truth. Anybody that tells you otherwise, I don't know if they're being maybe truthful with themselves. So it's weird. It's like ego and confidence, which, you know, definitely is there, you know what I mean? But there's also like a humbleness of like trying to build a better mousetrap. So it's like a weird, it's almost like these two things fighting for which one's going to come out on top. And sometimes it's a combination of both, and sometimes one wins over the other. But you kind of need both, to be honest with you, because one without the other, they fuel each other. You know, you become your own arch enemy and your own, you know. So yeah, so what happened is that in the beginning, I was just fucking with tempo so bad because I just wanted something to sound different. And also keep in mind this was 25 years ago. Catalog was not really it wasn't sexy, you know what I mean? Like it was basically like if you're a composer, you know, you were working on something and you threw in 10 ideas and 8 didn't make it. So you're sitting on your heart, whatever, it wasn't even a hard drive. They were tapes then. They were like, you know, digital tapes. And then you're like, oh shit, I got these tapes. I put like, you know, hours in, let me try and make something back. So everybody was just throwing like their B stock out there. And so then we kind of came along, those guys came along and they're like, hey dude, the approach we kind of sat down and figured out what we wanted to do was like, let's say the Black Keys came out with the record and everybody loved it. It was licensing gold. The problem is you weren't going to pay $150,000 to get a 15-second Black Keys track. So we basically sat down and I was like, hey, listen, you know, they'd give me that assignment, but you can't do a knockoff. A knockoff is cheap. It's shit. By the time it gets out there, it's already passing.
It's weird how you can almost pick up on like a cheap knockoff of something.
Oh, they're horrible. It's like if you're doing, you know, if the Macarena is the thing and you're putting out, you know, listen, you get a good run for 3 to 6 months and then it's dead. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants a knockoff Macarena right now. So you have to basically encompass the spirit of the project. And sometimes you have to draw a little outside the lines, you know? And so I would say, okay, here's what's cool about the Black Keys. It's dirty, it's gritty, it's loose, but it's professionally loose, you know what I mean? And it's got like, it's edgy. You kind of have to create the record that you were hoping they would make. So originally it was all instrumental, which was fucking easy for me. I'm like, hell yeah, this is great, you know? So they started to grow and then more feedback came in. You could build a better product. I'll tell you where I had really good success was doing the dark country stuff, because that wasn't really a thing. You know, me working with the guys at Extreme, that kind of became a thing. At least it wasn't a thing until we did it. I know that. And it all started from like that early Johnny Cash stuff. It just had that kind of like, you know, Old West, but yet kind of moderned up. You know how it started was? I did a song called Evil Ways, which is, there's 2 versions of it. There's like a bluesy version that got picked up real quick. So like everybody from like Jack in the Box to Reese's Pieces was using it.
That was big in the wrestling world though as well, right?
Yeah, huge. Yeah, they use it for Walkout, you know, because I had a good title, Evil Ways. Like, you don't want to be so pointed. Like, you can't be like, you know, hyper violent. No one wants that. Like, it's almost like you want to be the bad guy, but the good bad guy. Like, yeah. You can't be a 9 to 5 either. That's like weird. You can't be like, you know, like no one wants dad rock, you know, or maybe they do it, then you call it dad rock. So everything has to have an air of legitimacy. Otherwise, it reeks of it becomes like commerce, you know, and no one wants fucking commerce. You want art, and then you want to make it commerce if you're lucky enough to put the 2 together. But you can't approach it from that point. Otherwise, it just comes off like, dude, who wants their music safe? What the fuck? ugh, I don't, at least, I mean, maybe there are people, I don't know, but I'm not your guy for that. Anyways, I did that track and that started doing really well. And then there was a show called the Hatfields and McCoys that was on the Discovery Channel. And the Discovery Channel was real big. They had all like what is it? I don't know, maybe it was History Channel, Pawn Stars and all those like Swamp this and,
Storage Wars and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, storage, yeah, exactly,
American Pickers.
Yeah, American Pickers, yeah. Because what happened was when everything went to reality TV, let's say, a reality-based TV, which I don't know how real it is, but the point is it went from, let's say, half-hour episodic or hour episodic. Once the Jersey Shore kicked off and you could follow a bunch of drunk college kids with you get a couple of college kids with a red camera and like, hey, let's watch the girl throw up in the bucket. Oh, that's so funny. And then all your money was really just editing the hours and hours of footage together. So the budgets went from here to there, and people loved it. So the content, you still got the views, but you didn't have to spend millions. Friends was spending bajillions of dollars, to make a show, and everybody started watching that. So also what happened is the music budget went from here to here as well. So it went from a dollars game to a quarters game to a, dimes to nickels. So that's where it really fell into favor of a lot of the music production catalogs because people were like, well, fuck it, let's just license this stuff. So where Extreme really did well is we were making records. We'd spent so much time, like I was literally putting out stuff that was, you could put it on the radio same day, didn't matter. We were approaching it that way, but it was built a little different. You have different sets of rules, meaning you can't, if I write a song called Monday's the Saddest Day of the Week, who's going to license that? Whereas if you write a song called Evil Ways, that was kind of like, ooh, that's kind of, it's kind of like all the bike guys liked it and the car guys liked it. It was soccer mom tough, so that get used. So, and I'm sorry, I'm drifting, but it's
all right.
It's just the way my mind works. Like literally, I will forget everything I said in this conversation. And if we have the same conversation tomorrow, it'll be pretty much totally different. All truthful, just kind of different.
That's like your David Lee Roth meeting. People can look that one up.
Yeah, I searched that one, man. I'm not lying. It was awesome. I'm glad I did it, but it's a one and done for sure. But anyways, so we were doing this. There was a show called the Hatfields and McCoys, and Russell came up with this idea. He's like, hey man, take that song Evil Ways, but do something with, let's make it more like country, maybe Western. I was like, cool. So I took it and I slowed it down. And then at the same time, I was listening to like all the Johnny Cash. I was also listening to a lot of, because like I said, I like a lot of fringe stuff. So I was listening to a lot of gospel and a lot of almost like the field songs. And I was like, well, fuck it. Let's just kind of do this. So we slowed it down and we just made it kind of real dark. You know what I mean? And it was cool. And fucking people flipped out. They loved it, So the crazy part, this is Welcome to the Music Business. So that was originally going to be for the Hatfields and the McCoys for the mini-series. They love it. They got it. And it's the last I heard. As a matter of fact, I left the NAMM show on the 25th anniversary. I went up, I was playing on stage with Paul Gilbert and Randy Jackson, and I get a call backstage. And Russell's like, dude, they need it, and they need it like tomorrow morning. I'm like, I'm in Anaheim, man. And it's like, 9:00 at night. He's like, make it happen. I was like, man. So anyways, I play the thing. I thank everybody profusely. And I literally was in the car with my dad and my brother had come down and we were laughing. And so I go back and I work through the night and I hand the thing in the next day, like literally, like I think like at 9 a.m. on a Sunday, like they don't care, man. They weren't keeping church hours, man. It was time to go.
Was you like Lionel Richie in that We Are the World documentary? Did the award show? Then
only minus his talent, unfortunately. Jesus, right? And you know what I was going to say about that? I watched that thing. One, it's a great documentary. And two, man, kudos for him for just having such a good personality. That guy was the glue. He really, man, he never thought about how many moving parts it was. I mean, not only is the guy, and I've never met him, so I don't know. I don't know what kind of person he is. I can't speak because I'll never speak on anybody unless I've literally met him and I can just only tell you my experience. Like I met Gene Simmons from Kiss. Wouldn't do it twice. You know what I mean? That's my experience. Not saying he's not a nice guy, but I wouldn't bust an appointment to go meet him, But anyways, Lionel Richie just came off like the nicest guy. And man, I got to say, I walked out of there with more respect for the guy. And
that's a great documentary, dude.
Great documentary. It made me watch the Quincy Jones documentary, which is, man, talk about, this is real talent you're talking about here on so many levels. And you just, wow, and especially be able to harness that many creative people.
Oh, the egos, balancing them egos in that room.
It's like trying to herd drunk kittens. Like literally, it's brutal. Like all the egos, people walking out, But I think people just really liked him. You know what I mean? And they were just like, okay, cool. And they not like him. They respected him.
Lionel Richie might be one of those guys where they're like, Lionel Richie is really good at what he does. We've never seen him angry. Let's not make him angry. We don't know what's going to happen.
I wouldn't recommend it. Like I was watching the Quincy Jones documentary. I think people just respected him. And I think, which goes back to, do you want to be famous? Which is, if you want to be famous, you have to be famous with everybody across the world, and a lot of people that you're just not even going to like. Or do you want to be respected? And then like, you can just be a jazzo musician guy and, you played to 4 people in a pub, that you spent 30 years trying to perfect your craft. fuck that. You know what I mean? That ain't for me. I ain't doing that. But I think to me, the stuff, like the reason why, even when I did my instrumental records, the thing that I'm the happiest about with them is that they still hold up to this day. They did exactly what they were intended to do, which was, you want to hear me play guitar? Press play on any track at any time, and that is me demonstrating what I can do. I'm not trying to write the next hit. And they hold up considering the gear. I mean, keep in mind, I was doing it on borrowed gear, which I'd have to, we had nothing to work with. We were taping credit cards together and comping tracks, and I recorded a lot of that in my parents' garage. But they still hold up. They weren't so in style that they went out of style. That's the advantage of just doing your own thing. It becomes more of a timeless thing. And that, to me, especially as I'm getting older, and I'm just seeking out good stuff. I put on records. I like the good stuff. I don't care what years. I don't care. Obviously, the production gets better as you get older because technology just advances. But just because the technology is better doesn't mean the songs are better. A Beatles record is a Beatles record. You know what I mean? You listen to like Muddy Waters, the one he does with Johnny Winter, Manish Boy. Oh, man. Johnny Winter is the best hype man on the planet. Had you taken that song and recorded it in Atmos, it wouldn't matter. That song is just so good as is. That recording is so good. Technology doesn't matter. Technology is not an excuse. But the other side of the coin is, listen to a Muse record. You ain't doing that shit on a 4-track. You know what I mean? Like, and those guys are masters of that stuff. I'm listening to Idols right now. The way the textures and the tones and that shit, it's bananas, man. So each thing has its thing, and each thing is equally great if you're doing great shit. Yeah, I'm listening to stuff that's out there now that's been recorded last year, and it's fucking unlistenable. You know what I mean? So it's never the tools. It's always the craftsperson, however we're looking at it. Because I've got 2 daughters, so it's always give the ladies their flowers. So anyways, literally the day before this whole thing is supposed to be locked, it fell out. The History Channel did not use it. It was a contract issue. I don't really know to this day why it didn't happen, because it was locked. It was done. We were already, doing victory laps. It was great. And the day of, it fell out. I was never told why. So I was like, all right, well, that sucks. You know what I mean? It just didn't happen. But you just get so used to it. Like I said, until you've got the money in your hand and the check is cashed, and nothing matters,
Until you're on that stage or on that plane or...
Until you're holding that baby that's healthy in your arms, you got nothing. So then we were like, all right, well, let's make a dark country album. So we put it out on a dark country, and we just decided to make a bunch of tracks like that. And man, that thing just blew up. Like, for example, I've got a song, Dogs of War, which, keep in mind this. Okay, so if your viewers want to be entertained, because everybody loves to go, deep on the internet. If you put in Dogs of War, one video's got 30 million views. Another one's got 15. You put in Evil Ways, 15 million. I mean, and here's the best part. This is just somebody that took it and made a video. They're not even on my channel. I'm not even getting paid on these things. You know what I mean? Like, I think I might be musically, but I'm not on my channel. I'm not getting advertising. I don't have time. And somebody's like, well, why don't you, take them down? I'm like, let them do it, man.
As long as it's got that little link in the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. As long as they, it's fine, And so if you Google, punch my name up and see how many millions upon millions of views are there on these tracks. It's nuts. So that just becomes what it is. There's just, Dark Country always does well, but I try everything. And so the exciting thing for me with television and film is I'm working on a project right now we're doing a Dark Country one. We got another band project that we work on. I think I just did some funk, some techno rap. I love it. It's all fun stuff. And I'll be the first to admit, listen, rap, I'm not your guy for that. Everybody knows that. But you mix it with something else, I can come up with something interesting and exciting. And I love to challenge. So for me, it's like, what a great opportunity to get up, make music. My family, it went from buy guitar money to buy car money to buy house money. You know what I mean? And so who's complaining? I've done really, really, really well with it.
Speaking of making it fun, one of the things you did put some fun back into was your time with Poison. I'll get in trouble if I don't ask you about it.
Oh, yeah.
Following the departure of Richie Kotzen, you joined Poison. You gave a great rundown of events which led to you joining that band on my friend Chuck Schute's podcast. So I urge everyone to go listen to that. But I was curious to learn a little about the recording of Crack a Smile. You contributed heavily to the songs on that record. Was that all new material you came up with in the studio, or did you have some ideas already on tape?
No, it was all on the fly. So it was interesting. One, I got to meet a good friend of mine, a producer, this guy, Ross Hogarth, who was originally kind of the house guy. Ricky Rocket had his own studio at one point. It was in North Hollywood, had a blasted out, really nice old Neve board. Like, I forget, had 1073s or 1081s. It was loaded. It was great. Now, keep in mind, when I came in, so you have to realize, you have to see where the world's at. When I came out in California, metal was great. Like, I left Connecticut. Everybody had, their big jackets and their goofy mall haircuts. And, we had salt on the road and chains on the tires. I come out here and everybody's in good shape. Each guy's got a girl on each arm. I'm like, this place is paradise. You know what I mean? mean? Like rock was in its heyday, and it was fun and it was exciting and it was amazing. So I moved out when I was 19 because I had records to do and I was touring. I went on the road when I was 16, and I kind of, between being on the road and doing guitar clinics, I really wasn't home very much. I lived in my parents' garage, literally, like, I think it was like an 8x10 room, very small. It was just a room in the garage that had an air conditioner in it that was cut out, had a waterbed in it, because what kid doesn't have a waterbed, right? And it was great because I was kind of like an adult really early on, and my parents knew. They knew that I didn't drink. I didn't do any of that shit, you know what I mean? So I was just into lifestyle. So it was great. I had my own place, which is like an apartment. I could have girls come and go. It was like freedom at the right age. I got my driver's license when I was literally, I think, on my 16th birthday. And then I drove in to the city 4 days later to do a Michael Bolton thing, which turned out to a Cher thing. So I'd only been driving 4 days, and I'm driving in the city, Manhattan. But we were so crazy redneck that we were already driving motorcycles and shit on the street illegally. So it was like we were driving cars illegally. Who cared? You know what I mean? So Poison basically was kind of like, it was just an opportunity to really do this different thing. So, and I knew Richie. Richie and I, we kind of ran in the same circles. Even to this day, I've always been a fan of his, and I've always respected his skill set. And we've always gotten along really, really well. Anyone that doesn't know him, I would say he's a super sweet guy. He's really nice, and go up and say hi. He's really, he's the real deal in that regard.
We don't realize how young you all were at that time.
We were babies. We were total babies, but not really. We had lived a minute too, so it's like I was young, but not really, because I was already kind of adulting at that point, because it was just, I had such a different childhood than most people. And times were different. You could not see your kid for a couple of days and no one gave a shit. You know what I mean? It was, you checked in, it was fine. And it was, yeah. So he was out, and then I was in. I had already go check out Chuck's podcast. You'll hear about the whole audition process and all that stuff. So when I came in, the pinnacle was definitely starting to drop, but this was still the heyday of everything. Like, so it was definitely, this was right before grunge. Now, when grunge kicked in, that was fucking penicillin to rock. It changed within a matter of maybe 3 months. Like, I've never seen it. It was almost like, there was like a desert, and then 3 months later, there's a town there. You're like, what just happened? So once grunge kicked in, Nirvana was the death rattle of hair metal. And honestly, it needed to be, because it had just gotten so bloated, and, it was disappointing, because obviously the guitar was the focus of that, at least a lot of it. And so it was all, let's have a good time, let's party in time. Then these guys came in, they were brooding, it made sense. Once again, every generation wanted their own. So they're out. But when I came on, they were still living high. They all had their McMansions, they all had multiple cars in the driveway, all that stuff. And so I came in, and I got to just basically inject myself, like the singer's dating Pamela Anderson. By the way, side note, super sweet lady. Really nice, really kind. I remember talking to her, we'd be at rehearsal. She was really fun and nice and funny as shit, and just seemed really nice. Canadians are always the nicest people, But I got a chance to just be thrust into that. Now we're in the paparazzi's following us around. We're going to the nightclubs. There's Sylvester Stallone. There's this, boom, 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 And personally, I'm glad I had the experience, because I realized, I don't like any of this shit. You know what I mean? Like, I just truly loved the music. That's why I don't love to tour. I don't love traveling. I just love to make music. And I realized that, and I'm glad I had the experience, because now I know. So it was cool. And then I got a chance to be like band famous too, which was nice, because I was always, I played with Jack and Ginger, and it was great. You're in Rolling Stone, and they're hailing you as this next thing, you're this kid, and blah, blah. They're putting all these titles on you, which I never called myself any of that shit. That's what they called me. So if they want to call me whatever term, it's, in grandiose gesture, they want to be like, hey, fine, I'll take it. I'm not going to turn it down. But I never said that, and I didn't go out of my way to correct them, by the way, so that's fine, But so then you get to be band famous, and then you realize, so here's the advantage of band famous. You're famous. It's great. But the reality is, they could have put you in my spot, and you'd be famous too. So then you start realizing, well, does this really have any value? You know what I mean? It's like, she'll date me, she'll date you, I don't know if I want to date her at that point. You know what I mean? So great experience to know, and I'm glad I had it. I knew the second I got it, I was like, this ain't for me as far as that aspect of it. But the band was great. I got along with everybody. They were really cool with me. It was kind of like, I keep saying the same thing. It's kind of like a marriage of convenience. What they needed a songwriter, to be honest with you. The original guy, Cece, was very much an integral part of those songs. So it was a great mixture with him and the rest of the guys in the band. It was a great formula. When Richie came in, he was a songwriter. So they had a different spin. They went in a completely different direction, which I think the band needed, really, because it was me and him at the same time. And my approach was very much like Cece's. I was like, listen, dude, nobody on the planet is going to take this band serious. I just don't see it. You know what I mean? But who cares? You got the girls. Fuck them. You know what I mean? The girls love you. Who cares? You've won the Olympics. You've already got the gold medal. So why are you trying to go back and requalify for the job? And maybe just artistically they wanted that. And I think when Richie came in, because his skill set is so strong in that department, I think that just really resonated with, I know it did with Brett, and that's why they made that record, which I thought was a great record. You know what I mean? And I thought that was actually a good thing, but it was very different. So when I came in, I was like, dude, I wanted to go the complete opposing way. I wanted to keep it fun and rocking. And I obviously wanted to showcase the guitar because I'm also thinking, hey, this is a chance for me to really kind of compete on this level and get out to not just the guitar players. So what happened was we were supposed to take a year to make a record, which I was like, a year? That's insane. But there's a whole process. You write the record, then you record the record. But during this time, Brett is kind of going through this whole thing where he's dating these movie stars. And so he ends up crashing a car and his teeth are done. And it was like this whole, it was scripted behind the scenes to a T. I was like, man, this stuff really happens. So it ends up taking 2 years, but I'm getting paid either way. So I'm like, this is amazing. Let's do this. Take your time, gentlemen. Really what it came down to is the guys were great. I got along with them great. I really got along with Ricky probably the most. We ride dirt bikes together and do all this goofy shit. You know what I mean? He's just a really sweet guy at his core. We would go to Melbourne, Florida, which is where the bass player lived, and we would do 2-week blocks. And so we'd go down there and write. And so basically, once I met the guys, I knew what they were about. I just kind of wrote stuff that made sense for them. But you have to update it. You couldn't keep it. I actually wanted to make a record a lot simpler than they wanted to make it. They wanted that. Once again, they were trying to scratch an itch. They wanted that like credibility thing. And I'm like, dude, okay. So personally, I'm really proud of it. I think it came out great. We worked with Dwayne Barron and John Pradell, I believe, were the two producers. But it was interesting because they had a different way of recording than I did. So it was so behind the scenes, here's what it was. Band got along great. It was like we'd show up at rehearsal. I was on time. They were kind of on time. You know what I mean? We'd get there. We'd do a rehearsal. They'd be like, all right, we're out of here to whatever, the party or the strip club, whatever it was. And I'm like, fucking going home to sleep, dude. I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Like we just had these two. It was like we'd show up. We shook hands. Everything was great. And then we would go off to our own worlds and we'd come back in. But it kind of worked, you know what I mean? And it was really cool. So when we went to make the record, we recorded at Devonshire Recording Studios, which was in North Hollywood. And I lived in a studio apartment in Burbank. And I had a Mazda Miata and a brand new Range Rover, just the dumbest investments possible. And we made the record and it was kind of tough. I struggled a little bit because they had a real particular way of doing it. And I just wasn't happy with the way it was. Like I had originally tracked in Ricky's studio. We did a song, I think it was a David Bowie song, Fame, I think it was. And I had worked with this guy, Ross Hogarth, and the guitar sounded great. Whatever sound I got in the room, he was like one of the first times I really worked with an engineer that got that sound. It was just like, that's my sound. It was like, okay, there was nothing. If it sounded like shit in the room, it would sound like shit out here, but it sounded great in the room. And he got it. And I remember thinking, yeah, I got to keep an eye on this guy. He knew how to work that Neve board. He had it down. So when it came to making the records, like John and Dwayne were a production team as well. So they would bring in a lot of production elements, meaning keyboards and harmonies, and they would help with, if a song needed a part and arrangement, that was all them. But they also did the engineering. And it just wasn't sounding the way I wanted it to sound. My dad was making me amps at the time, so I was really particular about getting stuff. I wanted to bring Ross in to do the engineering, and that did not go well. They were like, no, dude, we're doing this. And so I literally remember, I kid you not, and this is meant in the best way, so this is not a bad thing. This is just a fly on the wall conversation. But at one point, my protest was I put toilet paper in my ears and I started up and I showed up with toilet paper sticking to my ears to cut the guitar tracks. And we laughed about it. But the recording process, the one thing that was great about John and Dwayne is they would let me, like if I was like, hey, that's okay, but I think we can get a better one, they would actually let me do it. And I really appreciated that about them. They were great. So they let me kind of have at it. So we kind of tracked and then we got it mixed by, I think it was Chris Lord-Alge that mixed the record. And he had a very particular mixing style and he was really nice. He let me come and sit in on the mixing sessions, which mixer does that? Never, right? And he was so cool.
Especially a guitarist.
Yeah, especially a guitar guy. And of course I was like, hey man, can we push that? You know what? He did it. He was so cool. But I was also very careful to only give notes that I really felt for the betterment of the song truly. Do you know what I mean? Like if it was like, hey man, listen, can we maybe the vocals, he was so cool. And he didn't need me for any of that stuff. That guy is so good. It was painful. But I got to say, he was super nice and he actually would do it. He'd be like, he'd listen to it and be like, yeah, let's do that. He'd push it and he did it, man. It was so cool. And the guy was so nice. So anybody, if you get a chance to work with him, I highly recommend it. And so we did that record and it took like 2 years from beginning to end. And then you'll love this. So like I said, I lived in an apartment. And the reason why is I'm in these guys' world where they have these houses and, these guys are living this, jet setter lifestyle. And so I was like, well, I want to buy a house like that too. You know what I mean? But this record had to have some steam behind it. So anyways, I decided I'm just going to save my money. And then once this record becomes huge, because of course every dream is how it happened, that'll get us to the next record and so on and so forth. So long short of it is we pull into rehearsal. This is about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years in. And we pull into rehearsal and I had just bought this Range Rover, bought it brand new cash because I had to get rid of it because my tax guy was like, dude, it's tax time. You got to pay your taxes. So either you buy a corporate asset and maybe we can try and write some of it off and you'll maybe, at least you can use some of the money for the corporation. And, because no matter what, we got to pay up. And I'm like, yep, I get it. So I buy the car and then I pull into the rehearsal. It was a band meeting and the car's got hydraulics and it's going up and down. And they're all gathered around the car and they're all patting me in the back. Man, what a great car. You should be so happy with it. By the way, the record got shelved. You're out. And that was it.
That's nuts. How much groundwork had gone into promo of it? Was there any like photo shoots or talk of video or anything like that?
Nothing. Nope. We did it. They sat out. I think they mastered it. And then it was kind of like getting ready to be released. They were trying to figure out, coordinate a release date. And then grunge had just kicked off and that was like selling salt water in the middle of the ocean, man. Nobody wanted rock. Rock was done. And keep in mind this, it became a pendulum because my skill set at the time, I was primarily known as a guitar guy. And then guitar was fucking dead. So now you got to try and make a living as a guitar, once again, selling salt water in the middle of the ocean. So that's when I was like, okay, but I had already kind of been doing a lot of the television stuff. So I kind of said, all right, I'll just kind of lean into this more.
Time to swing. And
you got to, listen, if they're not hiring, they're not hiring, you can be bitter about it or you just keep moving.
How would you enjoy, because you did some massive shows with them prior to recording the album. Yeah. I found a clip from an Argentinian music show you did called Rhythm of the Night, where you all trash the equipment at the end of it. I have so many questions about that clip. The crowd had pom-poms in there. There was backing dancers. The host was wearing Brett's jacket.
Honestly, we did so much goofy shit like that. I believe what it was. Oh man, I always try and get as much accurate stuff out there, but I'm getting older and I don't really remember a lot of it. I mean, meaning there's only so much storage in the old data bank here. I remember this. I at the time had an endorsement with Yamaha guitars. At the time I was using plaid guitars because when I was with Jack and Ginger, I went to Japan once. And I showed up with a custom-made guitar, one of the first guitars I ever gave you, but I had it customed out with pickups, stuff that you just couldn't get off the shelf. And I think we got there, on a Monday, and we had to play a show on a Wednesday. So we got there on a Monday, we did a press meet and greet, we took some pictures. And then on a Wednesday, I come there, and somebody had shown up at the show, and they had the exact same guitar. Somebody who within a day and a half had made a copy of the guitar. And I remember thinking, gee, I couldn't even get the parts. I mean, it was like, this was not like it was now. And I realized, okay, I get it. People are going to copy. So I just came up with the idea. I said, well, if people are going to copy it, they're going to have to work for it. You know what I mean? And that was the deal. And I wanted something that was kind of like, everybody kind of had their thing. Everybody had like, Yngwie had that cream Strat. You knew it was like Yngwie Strat, Van Halen had the striped guitar, and he was a big influence. So I decided I was going to do plaid because I figured, one, I guess I actually have a lot of Irish and Scottish lineage just because I'm Saraceno. Everybody thinks I'm Italian, but there's French, there's a lot of that. But it wasn't for any other reason than I just wanted something that I thought looked cool. So anyways, I do the plaid guitar. Yamaha had made me my own plaid. They had a model you could go to the store and buy. So when I went over there and I was with Poison, this was going to be a much higher profile gig. So I had the custom shop guitars, which is the ones I played on stage. They like had, necks that I made that were kind of the ones we're based off of. And then I had the model guitars. And I liked that. I actually played the stock models. So when we went on the show, I had a production model with me, like one that you get in the store. We had the lip sync, I think is what it was. And I was...
Yeah, it's definitely lip syncing.
Yeah, okay. And that's okay. So we had to do a couple of them, so I forget. But I think if it's the one where we go a little crazy, it's probably the first one we had to do. And the whole deal is when you go over there, you have a promoter. And the promoter has these deals with all these companies. So in order to do the show, you have all these other obligations you have to meet. You have to do the press meet and greets. You have to meet these people. You have to go do these things. It's like being a politician. You have to go thank all your supporters that got you in the position, I didn't want to sit there and lip sync. I was like, why are we lip syncing? Let's do this. So I was pissed about lip syncing. And the guys were like, dude, it just is what it is. And I'm like, I'm not lip syncing. And they're like, dude, you got to lip sync. Otherwise, we've already kind of signed this deal and you agreed to do this. So you got to lip sync. So I think if you look, I'm like holding the guitar backwards and I'm strumming it because as it wasn't a song that I did. I think it was like an earlier song that didn't have me playing on it, And at this point, it almost felt like a Japanese game show. Like, you're right. There was like people dressed up in costumes.
Yeah.
And it just was like,
all the crowds got pom-poms.
Yeah. Like it was, pom-poms and they got whistles and they're like throwing fruit or I don't remember what it was. And like now 52-year-old me would be like, this is hilarious. And I would lean into it. I was trying to establish myself serious. So I just remember playing the guitar and just like doing this like worst lip sync. And I remember at one point I just looked over, I think it was Brett, I forget. And I just remember thinking, this is my fucking career. So I took the guitar and I started throwing it in the air. Now keep in mind, it's my guitar. I own it. I'm not plugged into anything. So I'm throwing it, that's what's my recollection. If this is the show, it could have been another, because we did this on a couple of them. And so I basically decide, fuck it, I'm going to smash this thing because it was so goofy anyways. So I smash it. And then the guys, they look at me, they're like, oh shit. You know what I mean? This is fun. So then they start smashing the shit. Here's the difference. It was only my guitar that I smashed. So it was just, they had smashed like this totally like, it wasn't even like, it was like some shit drum kit that you'd get like at a swap meet that had like tape on the heads. I don't think it was worth more than like $75, but they start smashing everything. So then we do the show and, people, I think it went over well. I don't remember. But anyway, I just grabbed my piece of guitar. I get out of there. We get in the thing, we get back, and they gave us a bill for like 15 grand or something like that because it was the show's gear. Like, you can't do that.
It shows you trash it. And then they keep filming, like the presenter does like a bit of a talk after, and people are picking the gear up. And I thought, is this some like local band that's loaned the gear and Poison have just trashed it? Because they look so pissed. It's unbelievable.
Oh yeah, no, it did not, like, I think we went over well, but it was not, this was not scripted. This was not, and I didn't realize at the time, but it was frowned upon to say the least. But once again, I just smashed my own shit.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we had fun. And then like all types of shit. Like I learned a lot of things being in Poison. And like I said, I don't want this thing to go on for hours, and I'm sure everybody's got a life. So, but anyways, I remember once on the very first show I did with them, and I don't remember where it was, but I had Chuck Taylor sneakers that were plaid sneakers. I had like board shorts. I was a Pantera head and we were all buddies. And it was like, I was into that shit. I loved Slayer and all that stuff. I loved that shit. You know what I mean? So anyways, at the end of one show, we were feeding neck. We had this big, and it was great. The show was great. It was like Chile or Caracas. Those crowds are insane. Like it's nothing like, I can't even explain to you. People like in South America it's some of the most fun crowds to ever play for. It is like, it's like going to a sporting event. I can't even put it into words, to be honest. I don't know if I have the words to tell you how cool it is. It's just how cool they are. They're true fans. They love music, and they like appreciate it. Like they really, like you really feel like, wow, okay, cool. Like all that effort really makes it worth it. So all those fans, if any artist ever gets a chance to go overseas and play, it's like nothing I can possibly say. So you're into it and I'm of the moment. So I take the guitar, it's feeding back. It's the last show of the night. I run from one stage to the other. And at the time we had these big front wedges, because that's what we would hear the monitors back. This was before in-ears. I run, I'm adrenaline to the max. You know what I mean? It's the end of a show. It's great. You get to live out all your rock star type fantasies. You're throwing guitars in the air, you're playing, you're soloing, you're doing all these moves because this is the perfect band to do it with. And the crowd is truly loving it. Like it's a chance to almost go back in time and do something that you could never do. You know what I mean? So you figure, hey, I'm here. Let's live this dream. Let's live it to the fullest. I put the guitar down. I jump off this wedge and I'm so hyped, man. I flew out into the crowd, like so far, like I just didn't realize I'd go that far. And what I ended up doing was in the air, I kind of turned a little bit because I got nervous because I kind of panicked. I was like, oh shit, this is really going out there. So I kind of turned and I ended up falling back in a kind of almost like in a Jesus position a little bit. And all of a sudden couldn't breathe. I'm like, fuck. And the music's feeding back. The drums are going, like, it's just the crowds. I mean, like it's fucking loud, it's like, it's almost like a sensory overload. So I'm in there. I'm in the position and all of a sudden I can't breathe. And I'm like, fuck, I can't believe I just broke my larynx. What a cheesy way to go. I'm going to like choke to death in a crowd like that. Man, I was pissed, And then I had like necklaces on, but they were like rope ones. So all of a sudden I hear snap, 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 snap. They start coming off because people are holding you above their head and they're holding you and they're grabbing onto you. They're trying to pat you down, but it becomes kind of like a mauling of sorts because it's just crowd. You're in a crowd. You're kind of getting pummeled, but by the nicest people. So all of a sudden they start snapping. I can hear them snap, and I didn't know really what it was. My hair is being torn out, and the shirt is gone. And all of a sudden I can breathe. What happened was all the thing had broken off, and I could breathe. And all of a sudden I just hear the security just flattening people coming out to get me. They're pushing them and shoving, you know what I mean? So I get back on stage and I have one shoe on. I have my board shorts, luckily. No underwear, that's gone. I have a shoe, but no sock. So somehow they tore the sock off. It was crazy. Then the other foot's got nothing. And then I had a watch, a Rolex that Jack Bruce had given me. And I somehow, once I realized I wasn't going to die, I made a fist so that they couldn't get the watch off. And keep in mind, no one's trying to steal. It's not that. They're just excited. It's just of the moment. Everybody's just trying to get near the sun type thing. It's a weird thing. But everybody's really nice. It's hard to explain, But anyways, I get on stage. I think I crawled off stage. I'm backstage and the guys are laughing. They're like, dude, that was nuts. And then the tour manager says, you can never do that again. He says, you don't realize this, but if you got hurt, we're all going home. The sound guy. the light guy, the bus guy, catering, you know what I mean? The tour, we've signed contracts. And so it was just a great learning experience. I never would have gotten that in any of the bands. And so I was always grateful for that. I was grateful for the guys. So I guess if I could sum up my time with Poison is that it was an amazing experience. The guys were really nice to me. I had a great time, and I'd do the whole thing again, for sure.
Blues, I want you to time travel a little to a Friday night in the late 80s or early 90s, and you head into the video store, whether it be in Connecticut or when you moved out to LA. What movie soundtrack do you have on that Sony Walkman, and what 3 tapes are you going to rent for the weekend?
Okay, the only soundtrack I would listen to would be the Blues Brothers. That show was gold, man. The fact they actually smashed up that many cars, priceless. And the soundtrack is of legend, for sure. So that would be my thing. And then the 3 movies I would rent, that's tough, man. That's a tough. I guess, let me think about that. I would probably, if I could, I don't know if they have, I would want to get that Alcatraz Live in Japan with Yngwie, because I remember that thing. That was a barn burner.
Music videos. I miss music videos, dude, like buying the home videos.
Oh, man. He's so good. It's ridiculous. Especially then. He was just, he was so young. And I mean, people were terrified of that guy, man. And as far as like movie style, like, I don't know. Oh, Caddyshack. That was a big one. We loved Caddyshack. Dude, Caddyshack was classic. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that's like, probably Star Wars. Star Wars was awesome.
What would you have been, 6 years old when Star Wars hit in 77?
I don't remember. I was born in 71. So I don't know. I was of the age. And then the crazy part is I went back with my kids. I'm like, once again, I'm so like on or off. It's either everything in the world or it has no value. So I'm like that. I'm almost like it was funny how you're saying you grew up kind of hoarder style. Like I have certain things I'm totally into, and the rest of it you can literally throw. And then every now and then in my life, I just get rid of everything. I'm just like, I don't want anything. I'll start from scratch. I like that. Sometimes I don't even like going back. Like I get that people know me from these things, so I'll go back and do them. But like, I hate living in the past. It's like, I'm way more interested in what's happening now. But I respect it. And I don't want to diminish the accomplishments. And a lot of people were very instrumental in helping me. And I want them to be credited accordingly, because it wasn't just me. My dad managed me. There was this guy, Brian Cohen, that managed me. These guys did great things for me. And I've always appreciated that. But Star Wars was the shit, man. I loved it. But only 1 and 2. Like it got weak after that. And then the second they started doing these other ones, like what was that? Like to me, it's almost like Van Halen, Van Hagar. They're just 2 different worlds. I kind of feel like you're doing the Van Hagar era a disservice by calling it Van Halen, to be honest with you. Like there's the Roth years, and that's one thing, and it is. And then there's the Hagar years, and it's just a different thing altogether. And I kind of feel like they're just 2 different things.
I'd rather have Dave Van Halen and Van Hagar than the Star Wars prequels, though.
Those prequels were rough. They're hard on the soul, man. I mean, listen, I get it. Everybody has to pay for their summer homes. I get it. I'm a capitalist. I get it. Like I want to do well. I want to be able to afford health insurance and watch my kids thrive. I mean, so I don't want to be totally hypocritical, but couldn't be part of that. They're fucking unwatchable.
But speaking of music videos, you won't find a happier looking band than Van Halen on the Live Without a Net VHS.
Right? It's crazy. I've listened to that thing from, like I said, I've met Ed a handful of times. There's a crazy story where he invited me to come golfing, and it didn't end up happening. And I wanted to leave it at that, because I just didn't want to, you just don't want to meet, and I hate to say heroes, because as you get older, you realize that's not really a thing. But I just know this, his art was untouchable, and I just wanted to leave it at that. Do you know what I mean? Just for better or for worse, I just out of respect for that, I don't want to know how the sausage is made. I really don't. I just know that I loved the art, and that's what I'm going to judge. The rest of the stuff I have no interest in on anybody, to be honest with you. Like I never discuss like politics or religion or any of that stuff. I just do your thing. You know what I mean? It's cool. I'm interested in the art.
The art and the body of work.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we're going to judge. I'll be more than happy to talk about that, because I feel that's something I feel I can speak to, at least in regards to my stuff. But the rest of the stuff, it's not for me. I'll let everybody else in social media fight that out. You know what I mean? I definitely have my opinions, trust me, but I'm just going to keep them to myself and keep moving, because I want things to be cool and good. But I definitely appreciate you giving me this time and your platform. I really appreciate it. Hopefully it's not so long-winded, or maybe somebody's going on a long trip and they just need to not fall asleep while they're driving, in which case I got you.
Massive thank you to Blues Saraceno for taking so much time with me on today's Straight to Video podcast. As mentioned, if you enjoyed our talk, please be sure to listen to my buddy Chuck Schute's interview with Blues, as there's a bunch of other stories to be heard from his career. Now, as I've been mentioning on the past few episodes, we now have a Patreon for our 80s video shop in Alfreton, Derbyshire. We're bringing together a really cool community of people who want to help the shop to continue and to grow. And if you check out patreon.com/80s video shop, you can see all the cool fun options we have available, starting at just £2 a month, and every single donation really makes a difference. Also, you can now send text messages to me here on this podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, simply click on the link in the show notes and you can hit me right up. So that's all for this week's podcast. Hope you had a good time, and I'll be back for a brand new episode next Friday. So until then, make sure to always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.